Hello. Du- du- du.
What's going on, Tyson? How do you like the view of the window?
Hey Brian, how are you, man?
Doing good, doing good. 5:30 this side of the world. I had finished doing live previous to this, and I'm actually looking forward to our connection because we're really doing this cold, but it feels
Yeah,
good. It feels like there's some alignment there, so I'm excited.
absolutely. What was the highlight of your last live that you did just earlier?
Man, I had a great conversation with an old friend, hadn't spoken to in 4 years, and we were talking about the roles, if you will, of like the dance of the masculine and feminine energies that come up, and how women can step up and how men can step up. And to be honest with you, my highlight was really being in this woman's energy, like her confidence around what she was speaking into. I love the sureness and just the certainty of what she was sharing, and that made the conversation more alive for me and to share, what my perspective was, to hear hers, and it's just like a really rich conversation. Yeah. I love those
Mm-hmm.
exchanges.
Yeah, great. Happy. So we got connected. I'm curious, actually, how did we get connected? How did you did you find me through like Matt, or how'd you meet find
No,
me? What was it?
to be honest with you, I think I was just researching other man in relationship spaces, one to learn from them and see who to collaborate with. And your name popped up, and when I saw what you were sharing out to the world, I was like, this sounds like someone I definitely want to collaborate with. And so it's just sheer intuition, to be honest with you.
Cool, cool. Well, I'm so
Yeah,
glad that you reached out. And this
yeah,
is a juicy topic, right? I
yeah,
asked you,
yeah,
hey,
yeah.
what should we talk about? And you're like, well, usually I get a lot of people that want to join in when we talk about sex sells, right? And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree. I've talked a lot about this process of decommodifying our sexuality and decommodifying our orgasm. And so when you brought that up, I was like, yeah, this makes sense. Let's do it.
yeah,
So.
yeah. The interesting thing, about that when you ask is like, I don't steer away from conversations around sex. Actually, I think it's one of those topics that is a taboo that shouldn't be a taboo. But I also understand why it is because of the way it usually is portrayed in our everyday conversations, right? But just by the nature of when that comes up in my post, those tend to get more engagement. People tends to pique people's attention, so it just lets me know or gives me an idea of what's going on behind the scenes of where people's interests are.
hmm hmm Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes up for me around orgasm, just as a general theme, is looking at it from the scientific sort of perspective. There's a book. Have you ever read the book Cupid's Poison Arrow? Have you ever heard of that book?
No, 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 I haven't.
Okay. So basically, it's the science of what happens in the brain when we have orgasm, right? And it's all about, can we have non-ejaculatory sex where we're
Mm-hmm.
not pushing the limits to have all of these crazy orgasms and dopamine
Mm-hmm.
hits, and how does that impact pair bonding versus just getting high off the sexual experience? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because what I've noticed is, if we're chasing that dopamine hit and we're constantly, ejaculating and then getting high, then it's a lot easier for marketers to sell all the other shit to us too.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they got, here's what you need. You need to look good. You need this car. You need this new
Mm-hmm.
technology. You need this sex
Mm-hmm.
toy. You need this supplement because now your dick doesn't work because you obviously, have low life force or whatever. And so it's this sort of awareness that when we can get in better touch with retaining and not just having orgasm after orgasm after orgasm all the time, then we're not so susceptible to be commodified and or to be um, taken over by the marketing messages that tell us we need this and we need that. So that's kind of
Yeah,
where my
yeah,
mind goes when it comes to
yeah.
this sort of sex sells
Yeah, let's uh
conversation.
let's uh let's definitely play with that. You unpack some really good stuff in there, and I love how the synchronicities, because one thing that did come up in the previous live that I did was just that we were talking about how actually the specific topic was why it is that men tend to be can gravitate towards only rougher or dominant sex, and why women need that or feel like they need that. And we're just talking about how a lot of men aren't in their power in their everyday, and that's just an easy way for men to feel powerful and for women to feel their man's power, and so they kind of get stuck on that kind of singular way of like making love. And so we also talked about where they some people can seek that because that's where they can find an easy way of getting excitement of this kind of dopamine hit. You know, if they don't have like in their everyday lives like this kind of way of seeing and feeling pleasure and bliss and the simple things of literally smelling the roses, then we're stuck to the things of like orgasms and sex and the toys to get that next excitement as opposed to being with just the what is, you know. So I love how it's coming together, and I actually just want to like to hear more as you speak into this, like how the average person can understand like commodifying the orgasms, because I can have an idea where you want to go with this, but if this were new to me, I may not fully understand. Okay, well, an orgasm. What's wrong with orgasm? What's wrong with masturbation? What's wrong with ejaculation? I don't understand what's the problem.
Yeah. So I think where my mind goes to this is, I've helped hundreds of men with pornography addiction. I'm not anti-porn. It's just the way in which pornography uses us as a means to an end is
Yeah, yeah,
rampant in this world. So when I
yeah.
think about the sex industry, what I think about is they don't see us as a soul or as a human being. All they see
Mm,
us as
mm,
is a number, as a lead,
mm,
as an email, as an IP address, and
mm,
their goal is to keep us on their servers and on their sites as best as they possibly fucking can. So
yeah,
what
yeah.
I'm getting at here is that they're not looking at us as a human. They're looking at us as a dollar sign. And
Mm, mm,
even though like the porn industry is it's crazy. It's like a 90 something billion-dollar industry per year,
mm,
but only like 20% of people actually purchase anything as it relates to
mm,
pornography. So
mm,
when you
mhm,
think about that, you think about,
mhm,
okay, so it's a numbers game for them. If they can get us addicted to our orgasms, then they can
mhm,
keep us coming back to their sites where they can actually commodify us, right? So there's a necessary relationship between taking back our sovereignty and our power by saying,
mhm,
I'm not going to fucking give you my life force because I'm just
mhm,
going to be, I'm actually allowing you to commodify me. And
mhm,
so when I say, decommodifying yourself, what I'm really talking about is
mhm,
just taking back your own sovereignty to say no.
mhm,
And so then what I also see is it's not just the pornography industry, it's all industries are looking
yeah,
at us
yeah.
as a means to an end, whether they're trying to sell us a t-shirt, a necklace, a phone, a car, a
Mhm,
beauty product to keep us
mhm.
more sexually supple,
Social media.
social media, right? And so it's this awareness that sex is one of the places that we are most
Yeah,
susceptible to
yeah.
being commodified. And then how do we
Mm,
take that back? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. You know what I would like to touch on is I want to actually bring this closer to home for some people, and I'll do that by using my personal example.
Hmm.
So if we've been married for 5 years, so about 5, 6 years ago, just before I got married, I was definitely in a building stage of my life, and the building was to make some more money. I was launching some projects, and I was really just trying to figure it out. To give
Hmm.
some context, I live in Gran Canaria, Spain, a chain of Spanish islands off the coast of Morocco, and just figuring out how to live life here with my then fiance. Well, for about a year before we got married, maybe even a little bit more, I was addicted to masturbation and porn. It was
Hmm.
compulsive masturbation. It was a daily routine for me. Like,
Hmm.
and I didn't even know really why I was doing it. In retrospect, I explored that and it's very clear why, but at the time I didn't get it. All I knew was there's always a certain time of the day, right around between 12 and 2 o'clock. This is how I got dialed in, where it was like part of my routine, like
Hmm.
taking a walk around the park or, going to the gym. It was part of my routine. And what I didn't realize that in this stage when I was really like trying the best I could understand, I knew at that point in time to make build a business and fulfill like on purpose, fulfill a purpose and all these different things. I was actually draining that. I was
Hmm.
distracting myself away from it. And that inevitably made my journey feel much more complicated. I feel like it was much more out of reach as I was trying to do this, and it didn't make sense to me. So I want to offer that to you to then bring this closer to home to other men who may see it's just porn. It's just naked body. It's natural. It's just masturbation. So you're talking
Hmm.
about it's like it's draining my life force. What do you mean my life force? I'm fine after I masturbate. Like I feel great after I masturbate. Like taking my experience and then what you're speaking into, pull something out of
Hmm.
there.
Yeah. So one of the things that I teach men that I think is really important that most men don't understand is the science behind what's in our actual seminal fluid. So when you're looking at an ejaculation, it's the equivalent of 2 pieces of New York steak, 10 eggs, 6 lemons, and 2 oranges of vital nutrients,
Wow.
lipids, fats, sugars, proteins that are just leaving our body. And so then when
Mm,
that energy leaves our body and all of those nutrients, plus millions and millions of sperm, which think about the
mm,
power of a sperm. It created you, it created me. So there's also a
yeah.
soulful aspect to all of these
Yeah.
little swimmers. So if that's just going out mindlessly, then our
Yeah.
bodies are working on overdrive. Our kidneys,
Mm,
our
mm,
organs, our heart, we're pumping our blood because it's trying to do cell splits to replicate and to build more semen so that we can
mm,
actually have that in our system. So
mm.
when I think about the commodification of sexuality, what I'm really speaking to is that there's a science to when we're low on life force, then we don't feel good. And when we don't
Yeah.
feel good, well, then what do? Well, then we reach for all the other shit that we know we shouldn't be
Yes.
consuming
Yes.
to make us
Yes.
feel better. So then we're going to
Yes.
reach for the Netflix or the Adderall or the
Yes.
caffeine or the sugar
Yes.
or whatever to get a
Yes.
dopamine hit so that we actually don't feel so lethargic or feel so tired or feel so unmotivated because we just
Yeah.
lost all of our life force. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the whole aspect that I try to make it logical for men is like, let's
Yeah.
just talk about the logic of the science of our
Yeah.
semen, you know, and,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah,
an important
I
thing.
love that. I love that, and I don't want to pull away from like how we introduce like the commoditization of our ejaculation as it pertains to the porn industry. But I also do want to just pull out what I think is very parallel to this and almost can go under the radar, and that is for the men who find themselves maybe they don't watch a lot of porn, but they're very sexually active, whether it's with
Hmm.
one partner or with multiple partners, because in this way, this is where they get this dopamine hit as well, this boost of confidence, this sense of masculinity, and they're going for that. You're saying, Brian and Tyson, what's the problem now? I can't go out and have an active sex life. I can't go out there and be with women. Like I'm a masculine man, she's a feminine woman, and so our bodies come together. But I think if I understand you correctly, it's the same principle applies. Forget the commodity of it, but like really blowing off that life force, if you will, is the same process. Or do you find it two different things?
Yeah, I think, let me let me make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. So you're saying the actual life force itself is as it relates to wanting to go out and actually be with other women and or to be with a partner and to kind of go for it. Is that what you're talking about? Because I'm not really sure
No,
if
no,
I'm following
no,
you.
no, 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 not necessarily. What I mean is if we're sticking to the science of what's packed into the semen, right? You mentioned the
Hmm.
proteins, the steaks, and the eggs, and things like that. What I'm saying for men who are out there who's saying, well, I don't watch porn, so the porn's not a problem. But I guess I'm going to make sure I'm hearing you correctly in saying also in the ejaculation, the constant ejaculation without retention, that if a man were out there, except for every single night, kind of having sex with, multiple women, is there not a same, how do you say this, almost like reduction or drain of the life force of that, or do you see it as two different things?
Oh, I get what you're saying. So when a man just masturbates to porn or just by himself, there's no connection. But when you're actually being with a partner, there's
Mm,
actually other chemicals that are involved. There's oxytocin and
mm,
vasopressin, which are pair
mm,
bonding.
mm,
So yes, you're still gonna have the minerals and fats and lipids and sugars that are leaving the body, and so you're gonna feel
mm,
drained. But you also do get
mm,
the benefit of
mm,
the pair bonding chemicals, which do
mm,
feel good. And so
mm,
it's not the same level of
mm,
of of draining when you're
mm,
connecting with an individual versus when you're
mm,
actually
mm,
doing it alone. And then also, I was listening to Huberman the other day, and he was talking about how when we just masturbate alone, it actually creates an open loop in the actual part of the
mm,
brain. And so we
mm,
don't actually get that pair bonding. And so then we end up feeling actually quite hollow at the end versus if we're with a
mm,
partner.
mm.
And so
Yeah, very good.
and we're wiring ourselves to be eroticizing, watching other people have sex instead of ourselves have sex. And
Right,
that ends
right.
up having its own implications, of course. So, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. No, it definitely makes sense. And I suppose like in regards to like with a partner, like a committed relationship, I wonder again, would you find it different if like chasing the dopamine hit and commodifying an orgasm, whether it's through pornography or the glorification of random partners, like they'll have that connection of those that connection that comes through with it with someone else. But if it's just like almost like a man masturbating inside of a woman because he wants to be with a woman, I just wonder again if that is like also still kind of draining, or is it, well, it kind of weighs itself out because he's draining because it's just a casual sex thing, but he's also having this connection where he makes him feel good, you know? So in that the day-to-day things that men are confronted with of finding themselves and feeling powerful and on purpose.
Yeah, so what I'm really hearing you say is what's the difference between a casual partner
Mm,
hookup sexual
mm,
experience
mm.
versus what's the
Yeah.
difference between being in a loving,
Mm,
you know, beautiful journey with an
mm,
actual partner? And what I would say to that is when I was hooking up and I was just having random one night stands and all of that kind of bullshit, which was very, very like
mm,
infrequent. It was just for a period of time in college.
mm.
um, I would come out of those feeling really empty because it was just as a means to an end. It was just as a means to feel better, but it
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
didn't add any value to my life. Now, if
yeah.
I'm actually in a committed relationship, which I am now, those experiences are very different because if there is going to be a sexual exchange, uh, I feel unbelievable after. Like
Right, right.
if even if the life force does go out, like it's actually really, really powerful, meaning that I feel deeply connected. So I think
Yeah, yeah.
it's never about the orgasm or never about the thing. It's about your relationship with it. And if one
Right,
is just
yes.
to feel
Yeah.
better versus if one is to better feel, then you're going to
Mm,
get a different
mm.
result out of the experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Thank you for clarifying that. And, again, for me, for anyone who's out there has questions about these, I ask myself or Tyson, definitely specifically around the science from this, go to Tyson, he's your man. Because to me, it's understanding the subtleties. And to me, like they're quite obvious now, but I think to the average person may be a bit subtle of how to understand like where energy is going. If we find ourselves, maybe procrastinating a lot, we find ourselves doing a lot but not feeling fulfilled, we find ourselves with a lot of money but not having that satisfaction. These are just clues and areas in which you can look at and say, what is my relationship with pornography and ejaculation and masturbation? Not to make it wrong, it's just a questions, to find. And so I like how you open it up and said about the commodifying of it, because to me, it almost makes it, how you receive that is almost, how you saying, like, taking this away from me, like stopping my relationship with porn, actually taking it as like there's an entity out there who's intentionally dangling this proverbial carrot in front of my eyes to distract me and take me off my path. And in my mind, that actually makes it a bit more like, oh, fuck that. Like
I
you're not
know.
gonna myself away from it. Like, okay, cool. So it's not just me versus me. It's like me versus machine who's distracting me, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the aspects that I'm so glad you touch upon that I help men to actually feel into, which is the
Yeah,
anger and the frustration and the like
yeah,
fuck you to these
yeah,
technology bots. Because here's the thing, man, they have psychologists and therapists and search engine optimization
yeah,
experts that know exactly what to to feed you because they
yeah,
watch your IP address, they see where you log in, they see where you log off, and they know exactly where you ejaculated, and they're going to
yeah,
put more of that shit into your feed, and so
yeah,
then
yeah,
they're hooking you into the actual just, yeah, they're commodifying you. They're basically saying, I know
yeah,
how to keep you
yeah,
here and I'm going to use
yeah,
your life force because at some point I'll have an
yeah,
offer or an ad and you're going to click on it and I'm going to get paid off of that. And that's
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
world we live in today.
yeah,
So we
yeah.
have to get angry.
Yeah, yeah. Like even in that anger, and I want to take it back to, kind of connect this to, because I think sometimes people have this image of like a guy or a man who's, addicted to porn or compulsive masturbation as like this nerdy guy who's like a gamer and he's by himself, he's single, he's never going to get a woman. I wasn't that guy. I was in a very much so committed relationship, and I was, about to be married. I was definitely not a nerd, very ambitious, very outgoing, very charismatic, but that was my behind the scene pleasure that
Mhm.
was for me pleasurable in the moment, but keeping me distracted. And so, for the men out there who are also in committed relationships, it's something to look into. Of is this commoditization of this interaction you have, is that preventing you from deeper intimacy and connection with your actual partner?
Mhm.
Where are you seeking out this kind of this pleasure where you may be afraid to ask for it, with your partner, or where you're afraid to open it up, but you find a sense of vulnerability, in this dopamine hit on the platform. And so, any thoughts around that, as opposed to how men who are committed, relationships, but they maybe have this affair with, the bots?
Yeah, so I would like to answer this in a very unique way, which is to speak to the ladies out there that are listening, which is to say, a lot of women come to me and they go, hey, I just found out that my partner's watching porn, and like I'm trying to make a decision of whether I should leave them or not because this
Mm,
doesn't feel good to me. And what I always say to them is the porn did not start when you guys got together. The porn habit
mm,
started when, when your man was 12 years old, 13, 14, 15 years
mm,
old, and he used it to feel better, when he was sad
mm,
or sick or bored or disempowered or because he was stressed out or overwhelmed. That's where he actually soothed himself, and he found
yeah.
out that that worked. So now that
Mm,
he's in a relationship with you and those triggers come up or the stresses of life come up,
mm,
he's just going back to using the same way that he knows that works from
mm.
back in the day. And so often women and partners have a lot of difficulty trying to understand like what's this porn thing about. But it's not about
Right.
that they're not satisfied with their partner or their wife or their girlfriend. It's that often men are using pornography for reasons that have anything to do with sensuality or sexuality. It's just the easiest way to feel better. It's just
Right.
the
Right. Right.
fastest, most simple. It's like, think
Yeah.
about it like this. If you are
Yeah.
a heroin junkie, it is more
Mm.
difficult for you to go take the money to go find a dealer to take that heroin and put it in your arm than it is to
Yeah.
just log in. And it's the same brainwave experience. And so it's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
easy for you to just get a hit and to feel better for a moment, even though nothing in your life changes when you take that hit of porn. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's my take on that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. And, I love that what you brought in there. I want to actually say this as well, because when you talked about the satisfaction of feeling good, at least the way I hear this in my experience was, and when I relate this to like the married men as well, is it's not necessarily the feeling good of the sexual, it's the dopamine that comes from that. So, for example, when I was masturbating compulsively, I actually wasn't looking for sexual feel goodness. I was just going through a hard time. I felt challenged. I was like stressed out. I was spending so much money, not the money wasn't coming in. I was nervous about the wedding. There's a lot going on in a lot of areas in my external world that I wasn't really feeling strong or confident in. And like you said, close the blinds here, let my seat go back, bam, I feel good. Even if it's for a second or a minute, I had this feel good feeling that took me away from like the worries. It was a numbing agent, right? And
Hmm.
so when I hear that, especially coming back to so a lot of times when I'm working with the married men and they say they're into porn, it usually comes down to, well, my wife, she doesn't want to be as intimate, or I find that she's, not as sexually active as I am, and my drive is so much more stronger, all these different things. But getting down to it is what I'm hearing from you, like with your experience, is a lot of these men, it's actually not necessarily that they're doing it because of the sex drive itself, because they actually
Hmm.
want the actual sex. It's because they're actually craving intimacy, they're craving connection, they're craving to be understood, they're craving to be vulnerable. And in this a mix of emotions that they're having, what that turns out to be feel that way is then sex and masturbation. You're right. So they
Hmm.
may not understand it here, like, oh, I want to be intimate with my partner, and I want to have sex with her because I'm actually looking for intimacy or connection
Hmm.
or to feel understood or whatever it may be. It's just a simple transaction. But helping them to understand these different needs below the surface is really like transformational. So I wonder
Yeah.
if you have a similar experience with your men as well.
Absolutely. Both within my own
Yeah,
experience of life, but also
yeah,
with the men that I
yeah,
coach. And
yeah,
what I
yeah.
will say about that is when, as a man, when we're desiring intimacy or we feel horny, we have to be more finely attuned to what's going on with our partner. Like
Mm,
where is she at in her cycle, in her day, with
mm,
the
mm,
children, in her career, like what's going on with her? Because often we bid for connection at a
mm,
time when it's absolutely not going to result in anything but a
mm,
rejection. And so then when we feel
mm-hmm.
rejected, then we go back to the porn because the porn will never reject us. So what's
Ah,
important
yes.
is for us to attune to when is she in a good mood so that my bid for connection will be
Mm,
met by her in a
mm,
way that allows for us to come into a sexual
mm,
experience. And then if I do bid for connection when I think she's in a good mood, but she still is like, I can't do it, not going to work, it's not the right time,
mm.
can we actually sit in that and not go to the
Yeah.
porn, to the booze, to the alcohol,
Yes.
to
Yes.
to feeling sorry for herself or feeling destructively entitled? Can we actually be with those parts of us that have been like what we feel is rejected, and can we just sit in it, and can we then go transmute that energy into something creative and into something
Yes.
beautiful, whether it's our business or art or music or going for an exercise or dance or whatever, and then coming back to ourselves so that we keep our life force in and we don't just go ejaculate it out. So that's kind of
Yes,
what
yes,
I work with men on is can we see that their no doesn't mean no forever? It just means no, not now. And can we keep that
yeah,
life force in? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So good, so good. And that makes me almost feel like a calling, but almost feel like a little bit of a responsibility to add what I would say is like maybe even a step before that. And there's no right way to do this process. Again, at least for me, like as we're talking about this, and if you find that you identify with this conversation, make it your own. If you're not sure, ask. You have at least two, I know two solid men right here, right now, who will be happy to have a conversation with you to help carve out this path for you. Um, and what I want to say with that part of being attuned to your wife or your partner's needs, also, are you being dependent on this physical interaction to feel intimacy and to feel connection, to feel loved? And before you, okay, say, well, Tyson and Brian say, well, if I just kind of see when she's in a good mood, then I'll go ahead and make the move because then I get what I want. Well, so this wanting, this deeper need that you have, yes, can be shared and experienced with your partner, but actually before that or while at the same time, explore your deeper needs. Do you have something that have not resolved with yourself? Is there a deeper intimacy that you don't know? It's something you're hiding from. Are you afraid of a certain kind of vulnerability within yourself, and connecting with your partner in that way is an easy way to feel that? Because I also experience that sometimes, actually in most cases, that when men go to porn or to sex or any addiction, oftentimes we're running from ourselves. Like it sucks to look at yourself. Like I know, like I've gotten a lot better at it, and sometimes it still stings when I see like parts of myself I'm seeing for the first time. But in the beginning, it really sucked just to stop, like look at myself, and not judge what I saw. It really sucks. And so because we don't want to do that, we look for these other ways to distract ourselves, even allow ourselves to be decommodified or commodified by other things. And so for you, what would you say for that man who's like, okay, cool, I want to be more aware of where she's at, but then how can I really not feel dependent on her to feel that?
Hmm. I think that what's really critically important here is that most men are unaware, but they outsource their arousal to
Mm,
to their partner or to other people, right?
yes,
And so what
yes,
I'm getting at here is this is what porn programs us to do, which is I'm going to rely on the prefrontal cortex of my brain and these images to arouse me. And so then now I'm making that the responsibility of my partner to to arouse me. And so what I'm saying is if you can't just sit down and masturbate and allow yourself to bring yourself to full arousal all the way through an ejaculatory orgasmic experience, then
mm-hmm.
you're most likely outsourcing the responsibility to a
Yeah,
technology, a pill, a cream, or your partner to make you feel better. And that
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
feel, that's not relational with a partner
yes,
because it's not
mm-hmm.
her or his responsibility to make you feel better and or to create pleasure in your life. If you're
Yeah,
in that position where you're finding yourself being needy with your sexual energy and you're getting rejected a lot, then you got
yeah,
to bring
yeah,
it back
yeah,
to self and sit and do your own
yes,
practices.
yes,
And what I want to call attention to here is it's not your fault as a man. We have
yeah, yeah,
99% of men in this world that I work with have had no initiation into manhood, no initiation into
yeah,
sexual
yeah,
practices. There's a lot of grief under the surface, which is that
yeah,
we've been left to our devices and to the porn to
mm,
raise us. So when
yes,
we sit in that and go, oh, I actually need to self initiate, which means I need to actually learn how to be with my own pleasure and with my own
mm,
body and my own system and learn how to
mm,
be responsible for myself instead of outsourcing that to somebody else. So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
kind of the way
big
what
stuff.
I talk to men about. Yeah.
Yeah. You said something that made me think of something that comes up a frequent theme as well, especially like in the mismatch or what the men, actually both the men and women consider to be unbalanced, like where the man says, hey, I have a higher sex drive, the woman says his sex drive is too much, right? And then what that ends up spilling over into is her maybe saying, well, you're addicted to sex and you have these problems, these different things. The man says, I'm just a man, it's what I do, it's what I feel. And so also what I find is it challenging sometimes, especially when men are new to these conversations, is not making their desires wrong, like
Hmm.
not judging what they feel in their body, like not trying to validate or disvalidate what that experience is, but bringing a sense of curiosity to what's below the surface, which is what I hear you saying as well. Is okay, like what else is there? So if you happen to be a highly how do you say, have a high sex drive, I don't even know what to say, what the average or the normal or the healthy sex drive is. I don't know if anyone can actually say that. It's your,
Hmm.
to me, your individual journey of going back to self, sitting still, being curious with, is there a pattern in this sexuality? Is there a certain time of day? Am I feeling frustrated, or am I looking for connection, right? Am I now, like you say, outsourcing this, the need for sex to feel something else? And so what would you say to a man who's a bit conflicted and maybe even feel defensive to assert that his masculine sex drive is somehow wrong or somehow something he should be ashamed of?
Yeah. So the way I describe this is that in the human journey, there's the amoral animal, which is effectively just this thing that wants to procreate and its job is to procreate.
Yeah,
And then there's
yeah.
also the moral human soul or the moral human spirit. And so most of us are, we haven't integrated the amoral animal in us. And that amoral animal in us, its imperative is to spread our DNA and to actually procreate. And it doesn't care if we're in a relationship or if we have a religious belief or if we're monogamous or any of these things that we've done. It's going to look and it's going to want to have experiences that are novel outside of the relationship. So
Yeah.
what I say to men is can you love that part of you that is
Yes.
looking and or desiring to be outside of your marriage or your committed relationship, and
Mm, mm,
understand that that's okay and that that's normal and that that's actually the part of being a human.
mm.
And then as it relates to that part being super heightened and active, that's where we also have to be in touch with the moral human spirit within us,
Mm,
the soul, which is to
mm,
say, as you're feeling that drive, and if your partner's not able to connect with you, and then it gets pointed outwards at the porn or the external world, can
mm.
we humanize that person that we're objectifying? Can we look
Yes.
at that woman that's before us and go, oh, that's a soul, that's a daughter, that's a
Mm,
mother,
mm-hmm,
that's a sister.
mm-hmm,
She has a name, she has a life, and I don't get to just it's
mm,
not okay for me to just objectify her and to undress
mm,
her and to take her home to my
mm,
spank bank later and to
mm,
masturbate to
mm,
her. That's not
mm,
an okay thing to do.
mm,
Um, and that's not to say that I judge men that do that. I used to be that way. It's a transition that we go through as we mature and we start
mm,
to realize that it doesn't feel good actually
mm,
to be that type of man in the world. And in fact,
mm,
women in society and even animals don't feel safe in our presence when we're constantly doing that. And as
mm.
we step out of that way, then all of a sudden the whole universe opens up and we start to see that, oh, people feel safe in my presence. And that's a good
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I love the way you unpack that.
How about you?
I'm actually a little bit
How,
tick. I'm actually a little tick about spank bank. Actually, I'm still stuck on that. I never heard
well,
that.
I mean, let me ask you, let me ask you, when you were younger,
Mm,
let's say you watched a you watched a porn, porn film, or let's say you had an ex, or let's say you saw a hot woman on the beach or wherever. Was that a part of your journey? Which was that if you didn't have the porn or you didn't have your partner, would you draw upon those prefrontal cortex fantasies and bring those into your masturbation experience? Because that's what I call the spank bank. So have you
mm.
done that? Did you notice that in yourself? Is that something that you
Yeah.
have awareness
Yeah.
around?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and that, like you, I mean, even as a kid, like you said, I did stumble on my dad's porn collection probably when I was like 12 or 13, probably 12. And, when I didn't have access to that, I do remember getting, I don't even know where I got it from. I don't think anyone in my family ordered the Victoria's Secret magazines. As a,
Hmm.
13, 14-year-old seeing these half naked women, like I remember tearing these covers out. And Tyra Banks was my woman. I used to tear her pictures out and save them. Yeah, that'd be part of my fizzle and memory. Yeah, spank bank for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
Hmm.
can be an image that's a spank bank, a video, but it can also be just that the neural pathways remember those things and we can
Yeah,
actually recall them, and so
yeah, yeah.
ideally, so here's a interesting segue into a different way of being, because a lot of men that are out there,
mm,
they don't know that there's any way to be.
mm,
And I remember this was about 8 years ago when I first stopped watching pornography. I did a 30-day no porn. And the reason why I did is because I had a medical issue where I couldn't masturbate. It was too painful.
mm,
But
mm,
when I came out of that experience and I had my first orgasm where I was not thinking my way, meaning
mm,
that I had been using porn or fantasy or been with a partner my whole life. And in this experience, I was like, I'm not going to do that. And so I just looked at the moon, and I actually just
mm, mm,
masturbated while looking at the moon. And I
mm,
brought myself into what now I understand was my first real orgasm, because my body went
mm,
into this whole experience and it felt incredible. But what
mm,
the biggest takeaway of that was that my whole entire life since I was 10 years old, I was thinking my way into an orgasm instead of feeling my way
yeah,
into the orgasm.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when we can feel our way into an orgasm, we find that there's a million,
mm,
billion, infinite more pleasure in
mm,
that
mm,
experience as opposed to having to use some sort of pornographic
mm.
material to get yourself there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just to share from a different perspective, but a very similar when you say that, I was feeling it. So for about 3 years or so, my wife has had a medical condition, which essentially brought our intimacy and sex life to almost a screeching halt. I'd say probably average, you can have an average like maybe 6 times a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the beginning, those times were very, very challenging for me to navigate that space. I was kind of unraveling like my identity of what it meant to have like a non-active sex life, and what does it mean for me as a man? What does it mean for our relationship? All these different things, right? So anyway, moving through that though, and practicing semen retention and non-ejaculatory orgasms, what I noticed in that is feeling more of what my wife is going through and feeling what I'm going through. And although our sex life was dramatically reduced and infrequent, those times when I did have an orgasm, the sensation was so much more intense because I was connecting with her and myself on a different level. I wasn't trying to make it something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's just part of that practice. And I agree with you. Like, so before when people say, oh my God, you can have these full orgasm experiences, like that bullshit. That just sounds nice. That's just a way to sell
Yep.
something. Now, I don't know if I had it or not, but I know, like I said, when it feels it through my entire body, it's like a full body experience. That's what it is now. And I much prefer these less frequent encounters that are so much more powerful than before. We're just kind of going through like the mechanics of a transactional thing. I mean, we still made love, but it was less intentional, maybe more from my standpoint, because of course I got a lot of value of that, like as a man and with my wife and before we got married, like to be engaged in that. But along that journey, in that process, it now is definitely that this feeling into it, like really connecting our breaths at the same time, like listening to and feeling to her heart. And it may sound like, this kind of flowy kind of like, I don't know, no one really has sex that way. It's like, well, you could if you wanted to. But I also think a lot of men are afraid of that. At least I was, because it almost felt too soft, felt too woo-woo. It felt too kind of out there. I had to trust this thing. And it wasn't, for me at least, it wasn't something I trusted immediately. It took me time to practice with that, mainly because of this, I can say now as a gift, this medical condition that my wife still has, disrupted what was so easy for me, to using the memories and a certain kind of imagination. It disrupted that. It almost forced me to look at it differently. And the gift on the backside of that was a much deeper connection with her and myself. So thank you for unlocking that, because I got to go down memory lane with that.
Mm, yeah. So what I'm hearing is that in not being able to have sex so frequently, it shifted the way that you related to it, and it became more grounded and or special. And in that unique specialness, because it doesn't happen as often, then there was the buildup of that sexual desire and that
Yeah.
sexual energy, so that when you guys did connect, those orgasmic experiences ended up taking on a completely different shape
Mm,
and form and moving through your system in ways that were
mm,
profoundly beautiful and connecting and healing. Is
mm,
that's the way that
mm,
I hear you? Does that feel,
mm.
is that what I'm getting at
Spot,
there, or what you were getting at?
spot on. Actually, what you said, but and you didn't say it directly, but what feels true to me now, and I never connected with this, is I don't know. Also, in this trajectory of almost like if we how do you say this? I liken the sexual appetite with actual food appetite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like perhaps in this, because I knew or gained accustomed that I may not have sex until several, 3, 4, 5 months from now, I was almost like savoring the moment, if you will. Like I don't know if I'm gonna get this. I'm like eating up as much as this connection I can get
Yes.
right now, like storing it in my cheeks, and like really. And so I think
Yes.
again, I didn't do that consciously, but I can now see how that probably played out and again guided me naturally into the savoring the moment as opposed to just trying to crank it out because I know we're gonna eat tomorrow. I know we're gonna have
Mm-hmm.
sex next week. I don't know if that's gonna be the case. So like I'm gonna really be in this.
Yeah, yeah, and I can say that because of my medical condition and taking 30 days off, when I got to that moment, I wasn't just gonna go for it and like have like a ejaculatory like 2 minute sneeze, right? I was gonna savor it. It was gonna be beautiful, and it was, and that creates a different reality. So sometimes there are these silver linings in these medical conditions and in these
Yes.
things that where we have to pause where we
Mm.
so become so present that it opens up a whole other dimensional frequency.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm happy that you experienced that with your wife and sounds beautiful and healing.
Mm. Mm. It really is, and so I don't want to. So actually, I will say one last thing on that, and then perhaps we can. It's actually I love the way the conversation went. It's really kind of went organic, with what we proposed here. But specifically around that, because I know I do experience when I'm working with men have something similar, not necessarily with their wife having an issue, but perhaps the vision that they had of what their marriage is going to look like and what they're going to be like has changed. They can then develop resentments and be
Mm-hmm.
unwilling to shift. And that's definitely something that was part of that first part of that 3 years thing that I went through, where I was so
Mm-hmm.
attached to what I thought it was going to be like. And what it was before is I was not allowing just our relationship and our connection to evolve and to be reimagined and to morph into something different, maybe even better. All I saw was, oh, this is the vision. This is what we were doing, and I felt almost like I was losing it. So I was trying to grasp and hold on to this thing, and in doing so, I put so much pressure on my wife, which did not help her condition, which did not help her support, did not help her heal. It only created this kind of combative, resentful energy that I created. And so being able to allow the organic nature of that to shift with that. And so I just really want to speak into that for the men out there is the opportunity in these gifts that as they come. So you can see it as it's an opportunity to grow, to evolve, to find a connection, or you can tell yourself the story like I did in the beginning of this sucks, we're not having as much, why aren't you doing it, and all these different things, And so there are gifts in these, I say, unseemingly opportunities that are presented to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm curious, in that experience for you, did that create a pause in relationship to even this conversation that we're having right now? Meaning, did that experience open up this body of work and your capacity to have these types of conversations and to be in a position of leadership to men because of what actually transpired between you? Because then there was a totally different way of relating to sex that was so much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And did that not have an impact on the way that you now are showing up and speaking to people?
Oh, 100%,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Tyson, it definitely it propelled like the path I was on in a way that I didn't expect, that I didn't think I even wanted, I was looking for. And it helped me to relate differently because I'll be honest with you, before when I started, in this coaching, mentoring, guiding space, I feel like I felt more of an attachment of being the teacher and I had to
Mm-hmm.
share my knowledge and instructions, all the things I learned. It came from a place, it was a good intent, it was well intended, but I think it definitely came from, let me just share this wisdom that I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having have moved through this and then put my practices really to the test, even though I really like to live in as much integrity as I can, now going through a shakeup, like this medical condition means that my wife and I aren't going to have biological kids. Boom.
Whoa.
Grief process. It
Whoa.
means that, bam, our sex life has totally changed. It means her energy levels have totally changed. Her view of self has totally changed. So
Mm-hmm.
all these ideas that I would tell myself that I was as a man, I'm grounded, I'm compassionate, I'm loving, I give grace. So the universe said, bam, here's take the test. So you say you're this, let's see where you are with that. And the truth was, I wasn't as graceful or integrated or as evolved as I believe myself to be, which is okay, but that opportunity just gave me an opportunity to really, really understand myself differently and expand through this. Because there were times in the beginning I wanted to throw the towel in. Like I don't know what's going on. This is frustrating. I got no manual of how to deal with this. I didn't sign up for that either. I didn't sign up for that life. But again, that was me being attached to what this was, as opposed to what can this be, and say, okay, she's my teacher. This barrier, this health condition is just an opportunity to grow, And so it definitely expand my capacity and to speak more into that. And it also helps me with my deeper wound of like perfectionism and feeling worthy and being judged. And so to be able to speak openly and say, like, I haven't had sex in X amount of months, in the beginning it was terrifying. But now I understand that there's so many men out there who are experiencing something similar. And so by being able to share that, just like my experience on that, hopefully somewhere is going to get someone to say, okay, wow, I don't have to give up. I don't have to cheat. I don't have to go to porn. I don't have to make this, this is something that's happening to me, in the best way I can, and trust that they'll be guided on their journey as they need to be,
What I hear is you moved through feeling like a victim to this ailment, and you moved into it actually creating patience and groundedness, and through that portal created a level of intimacy and spiritual union and connection that could have not ever been even known unless you would have actually gone through that fire. And so that is often where these gifts are born, and our deep capacity to be empathetic to other people who have these issues. And I can say that for myself because I have what's called interstitial bladder cystitis, which is a chronic bladder disorder which causes pins and needles through my urethra and bladder. And so not only did I deal with not being able to masturbate, which is why I had to outgrow porn, but I also had premature ejaculation issues. And then they gave me a bunch of antibiotics and antifungals, which tanked my testosterone levels. So basically, I went into suicidal thoughts. So when I work with men, I can empathize with their porn habits. I can empathize with their premature ejaculation, and I can empathize with their erectile dysfunction from my own perspective, and going, I know what that's like to feel fucking scared that you're going to lose your partner, that she's going to abandon you because you can't get it up, or because you're premature ejaculating, or she's questioning your sexuality because you can't get it up, when it has nothing to do with that, because my T levels were so low. And so it's understanding that there are these nuggets, these gifts, these like beautiful things in our most deepest ailments and struggles and pains, whether it's our own or whether it's our partners. And if we're willing to stay, those things will blossom. And that to me is an integrated and a humble and a loving, unconditionally loving man and father. That's the way I see it.
Brother, thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna slow down and just soak that in, because that's good stuff. Yes to all that, and actually I'm moved by that, because there was a time where, you talk about the initiation process, and in that initiation process comes like a threshold, like of crossing over to something, to stepping in. And I've had many of those. I had two official ones, like guided, but then in my day-to-day in this journey that you're speaking of, there have been several of those times where I've stepped up against that threshold, and I was like, fuck it, I don't want to step over this. I don't want to. That means there's more responsibility. That means I'm kind of stepping into the unknown. That means I have to trust. I have to use faith. There's no control in this, at least from my experience of what this was. And so being able to step into that, and then sometimes not. There's been times I said, I'm just not doing this time. But to look at the times and say, you know what, in this mini initiation that I had within myself, me versus me, like those have been integral moments. And as time goes on, I can identify this more quickly and say, okay, Brian, this sucks right now. It's all right. It's all good. You've been here. You've done that. Maybe it's not the same situation, but you're similar feeling. Let's go, and I believe that is the way forward. And when I hear you speak a lot into, to your content and to men, that's also why I resonate, why I want to reach out to you, is we have the same shared commonality of our truth on what the masculine experience can be. I only say should be. I'm not going to say should, because I know it's going to judge someone's process. You do what you want to do. But when we're talking about the world, when we're talking about safety, when we're talking about seeing change, we're talking about abundance and all these different things, it requires us to evolve and to step into that in places that will be uncomfortable in the beginning, but really aligning this desire that you have and moving past the fear, which isn't always easy. My experience, for me, it has not always easy. And there's times where I just want to just like, this is too much work. Like, why even take this path? And at the same time, I was like, I love it. I would never go back. Actually, I can't go back. It's impossible.
Yeah. One of the things, I think it's the Gottmans, they're relationship experts, but they basically say that until you go through two really, really like super challenging experiences, one for each partner, where the other partner has to support them and to stay, then the
Mm,
relationship isn't actually fully real yet. And so
yeah,
what
yeah.
I also hear here, or what I'm hearing, is that your wife's going through this pretty incredibly, I can only imagine, very frustrating and very,
Mm,
um, yeah, like there's grief there. Like if you desire to have your own children and now all of a sudden you can't have a child, like,
mm,
and so you staying is you're being of support to her and her process, but of course that still affects you too. And
yes.
they basically say that once that happens both ways, whether that's a death in the family or a medical condition or an injury or one of those, and both parties have to support each other, then the relationship actually is fully stabilized and real. And then from
Yeah,
there, you can start to grow on that, where both parties didn't
yeah,
abandon when it got tough. So I just want to
yeah,
acknowledge
yeah,
that
yeah.
you
Appreciate it.
stayed, even though there was part of you that didn't
Mm,
want to.
mm, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Receiving. Thank you for speaking in that. 'Cause sometimes I'm really good at being hard on myself and can forget that. So thank you for seeing that, recognizing that.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Love these connections. You never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, we're talking about sex cells, and all of a sudden now we're going totally different direction.
We went where it needed to go. So on this side of things, to bring things to a close, what is there anything that feels alive for you to speak into before we wrap up?
Yeah. So I teach one mythopoetic map, and it's the foundational core principle that I teach men. And women could actually relate it to themselves if they wanted to, but I'm not a I'm not a woman in this life. I'm a man.
Mm,
So I will
mm,
only say this is
mm,
a situation for men. So this is a map, which means it's not a capital T truth. It's just
mm,
something to try on as a man. And basically what that map is the way that a man treats his penis is the way that he treats everyone and everything in the world. And so
mm,
what I mean by that is it took me decades to actually hold my own penis in my hand and say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry
mm,
that I pushed you to the limits, that I
mm,
basically used you and abused you whenever I wanted to, that I took it so far when I was a teenager that I even like took it to a place of bleeding, like
mm,
literally I would hurt myself. I didn't have any context to what I was doing, but what I do see now is that whenever I wanted to use and abuse my body and objectify it, I did. And I objectified my penis and I objectified myself over and over and over and over again. And by doing that, that showed up in the way in which I objectified and commodified
yeah.
other people, women,
Mm,
partners, the natural world, and even the
mm,
way in which I did business.
mm,
And so,
mm,
what the journey is, if you're a man out there and you're listening, is how can I love my body, love my penis, and treat it with kindness, respect, and care, and not push it to the limit, and not force it to do something that it doesn't want to do, or that it's not like, can we be kind and loving to our entire system? Because the way that we treat ourselves and the way that we love ourselves is directly correlated to the way in
yes.
which we treat everything and everyone else outside of us. And
Yes. Mm,
that is where
mm,
self-love happens, when we really can love
mm,
our own penis and treat it with kindness and care. Yeah.
mm, 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 mm. Good stuff. Is this an ongoing program, or is it like an individual, one-on-one group, or how's this work?
Well, that's just a map. So that's just a
Mm.
teaching.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
It's
Mm,
just a teaching. It's just that
mm,
like,
mm,
when men come to me to work, whether it's
mm,
semen retention or
mm,
pornography,
mm,
or whether it's
mm,
one-on-one coaching or couples
mm,
coaching or men's
mm.
work, whatever
Yeah.
containers I'm in, it's the thing that I share that gets
Yeah.
men thinking. And men
Yeah.
go, wow. And then often they go, oh my gosh, I've been bullying
Mm-hmm.
myself for so much. And if this thing
Yes.
was an individual, like if my penis was a human being, the way that I treat it, it would not be very
Right.
happy with me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then what I think about is well, let's have some grace for ourselves. And here's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
when I was born, I was circumcised right out of the gate, right? 3 hours later. Were you?
Hmm.
Right? So the point
Yep.
is my body was objectified before I had any agency. My body was
Yeah.
treated with mutilation before I actually had any control over that. So
Yeah.
we often treat our bodies in the same ways in which the world has treated it. And if you're a circumcised man, it makes a lot of sense why we would be objectifying ourselves in the same way we were objectified before we were pre-verbal and even had egoic consciousness, right? So
Mm.
it's having grace for ourselves, knowing that the way our bodies were treated before us is also how we treat it today, and how we treat it today is how we treat the world.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. I love that. Thank you for really speaking into that connection. To me, it's the full circle of what we're going into. At least the way I've seen, the way I'm hearing this is, to almost fight you, if you will, like to rage against the machine, like the machine that wants to commodify our bodies and our orgasms, right? And to connect that with our deeper purpose and our mission is something we really feel in us. And oftentimes with these distracting natures, these platforms, these bots, the pornography, it's easy to take our attention, distract us, take our life force that really prevents us from feeling that fulfillment. So coming back into that coming back to self and that self-love, being able to treat ourselves differently is definitely going to affect how we live as a man, with purpose and on mission. So yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Mm. All
Brian,
right,
for
Tyson. Yeah.
any final words on your side?
Um, Well, words and this, so separate two things is I just wanted to share for anyone out here, couples who are looking for support. I do have a program called Intentional Union that supports committed couples. For those people who are singles and are looking to be prepared to get into a conscious partnership, I have two pathways for that as well. One for the women called Awaken the Goddess, and one for the men called Man Unshakable. So if you have more information, reach out to that. But really want to speak into is I'm just really grateful for this connection. I'm glad we trusted. I'm glad we follow that intuition. I got a lot more from this exchange, this transmission from you than I expected, to be honest with you. And I'm glad we went there. So I'm recognizing myself, recognizing for you for showing up and sharing your wisdom, your experience, and just that presence. You admit and exuded a presence that makes people feel safe. So thank you for being that.
Thank you, Brian. And let's do this again.
Yeah,
This was fun.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, guys.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Peace.